welcome back to Trim the Fat. It's a podcast designed to help us on our emotional, our spiritual, and our physical journey. Today I have with me Dr. Jessi Gold. She's a psychologist. She's an author. She's all those things. I'll let her introduce herself to you, and then we'll get into our episode. Okay. Dr. Jessi Gold.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. So I am the Chief Wellness Officer for the University of Tennessee System, and I'm an Associate Professor of Psychiatry in the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. I still see patients. I write. I do all of the things.
That is good. So when I said psychologist, I should have said psychiatrist.
Yes.
That's fine. That's what we do. That's what we say. And there's a difference. Some people think that they're the same.
It's very confusing, I think, because we use like the terms really interchangeably. And I think we use like therapist very vaguely.
Yes.
But basically, I went to medical school just like your primary care doctor or your OBGYN, except for instead of going to specialize in babies, I specialized in the mind. So I went to an extra 4 years of training after med school in psychiatry. And usually the biggest difference that people say is that we can prescribe and people who are psychologists can't.
But it's more, right?
There's more. It's just like what our training's really different. We probably see more of the acute, like really sick people in the hospital. We do a lot of the intersection between medicine and psychiatry. So if like you have a medical illness that's making you have symptoms, we're probably the people who look at that because we can do the medicine stuff too.
I get it. Okay. So
does that make sense?
I'm glad that I said that. So, that does make sense. So a lot of people, let me tell you, a lot of people, even educated people still think that therapists, psychiatrists are one and the same. A lot of people think that psychologists, therapists can prescribe, and sometimes they can't. Psychiatrists can prescribe, and a lot of people think that the psychiatrist can't do the whole body, and you can intertwine the whole body.
Yeah, and we learn therapy less than somebody who got a PhD in psychology. So they do like years of therapy training. We do therapy as part of what we do. So oftentimes, like you won't see a lot of people just doing therapy who are psychiatrists, like just practicing therapy, but some people do. A lot of times it's both or it's more the medication stuff.
Okay, I got it. So I was blown away when I met you at the UT Alumni Board meeting, and I was like, okay, I have to see how we can get her on. I mean, because everything you said, I was like sitting there taking notes. I'm sitting there, I'm like trying to take pictures of the screen, and then you sent out the slides from it, but it was so intriguing, and the way you make things relatable and real. I just thought that it would be a blessing just to have you here. So I know I want you to tell how you got here, because you're not really from Memphis.
Nope.
Yeah, and you just got here, right?
I did. I just got here in February, really the end of January, but I started my job in February, just in time for that like big freeze snowstorm and my pipes to burst.
Mine did too.
So it was a nice welcome, but I think it was good. I came most recently from St. Louis. Okay. So I was there for 5 years and worked at WashU in St. Louis. Okay. But then I got here.
And before St. Louis, you were in California?
This one's going to make it. This is a doozy, I think. So before that, I was in California. Before that, I was in Connecticut. Before that, I was in D.C. Before that, I was in Philadelphia. Before that, I was in Florida.
Yes, I love it.
Before that, I was in New Jersey.
Around the world. I love it though. But I love it. It makes you more, you learn the people, you learn the things, and pick up different things from different cultures and areas.
Yeah. And for school, there's a lot of like 4-year blocks. And I thought it was kind of fun to go somewhere for like a prescribed amount of time and be like, okay, if I hate it, I just finish school and leave.
So good.
And so I moved a lot with that because it seemed like a natural time to be moving. This move was for a better job that I was more excited for. Okay. And so that was really where that came from. But the other stuff was like, this is fun. What's California like? Yeah. Let's go here. And
But you left California and went to St. Louis. I just left. I'm from Chicago. I would not move to St. Louis. I just went there last weekend for about 2 weekends ago for a concert, had a ball. Yeah. But I don't see myself living there. I did pass WashU. Yeah. And all that. But
it's really funny. People in California, like when I moved to California, because I was on the East Coast and my folks are in Florida, I was always going to come back closer. And nobody believed me. Okay. Everyone was like, once you're in California, you don't leave California. It like invades your brain and you're stuck here. And I was like, I promise you I'm going to leave. And they just didn't buy it, but I left. And, again, sort of job is how I ended up in St. Louis. Like I wanted to do a mixture of like college mental health and seeing college kids as patients and then getting to still teach and do other things in the psychiatry program.
College mental health. That had to be one. Yeah, because I remember, you remember when you were in college, and I remember when I was in college. Is that much more, is it harder than the professional adults?
I mean, I think people are always like, are college students worse than they were before? The data would say yes, but I think it's complex. Like, I think they talk about mental health a lot more. Like, I'm not that old, but I don't remember anybody in my college taking time off for mental health reasons or really talking about that stuff. I mean, there were definitely people who went and saw the school counselor, and I was definitely one of those people, but I wasn't like in a situation where people are all talking about their mental health. Nobody talks medications and things like that. And so I think it's definitely more open, but I think they also have sort of more stressors, especially after COVID. I think people want to blame social media exclusively. Yeah. And I think that there's some impact of social media, but I'm of the team that it's not like the worst thing that's ever existed and the only problem. Yes. It might make people in your comments angry, but I think for me, it's not going away. There's always been once they started social, there's just been a different form and it's evolved. And we really need to like teach them how to use it mindfully instead of taking it away from them completely. Because if we take it away from them completely, it's going to be like, you know, when your parents and like keep Oreos and you really wanted Oreos and you went to a friend's house and they had Oreos and then you had 50 Oreos. That's how I feel about this whole like just take it away from them completely thing. It's why like binge drinking in college is like the way it is too. And I think, you know, we just have to be a little mindful about that and like definitely should be aware that it can impact your mental health, that it can impact your self-esteem, but it shouldn't be like, if we fix that, we're good. Because there's so many other things going on. Because
there's so many. Here's the thing. I don't know if it'll make people mad or not, but because I think that we have to be rational about it. Because I know from one of my friends, his timeline has way more, we say more ratchet things that's not positive than mine. So they say they look at the algorithm and things, but it's like what you look at is kept up with. And I look at a lot of positive things. Mm-hmm. And then I want my daughter to too, but she's 12 going on 13. Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm trying to teach her some things you're not even supposed to be exposed to right now. And it's there. So I'm letting you see this. But then I see that she learns so much from it. She learns things about dance. She learns things about acting. She learns things about God. She learns things about school that helps, So it is a positive. Mm-hmm. But like you said, we need to learn how to use it depending on where you are, your age, the season of your life and things like that. So I agree that it should not be taken away because they'll sneak. Because I know I tried to take it away from my daughter. She was 10 though. Yeah. And I said, no, you can't do it. There's no need for you to do this. So she went to her friend's house when I finally let her spend the night. They were on TikTok and I saw on TikTok. So, I agree.
Yeah, it's really complicated. It's definitely like the Oreos. I think it's complicated because I do think like for younger kids, we probably need more instruction around that and better able to have limits around that. But it needs to be figured out because it's kind of a new thing. But, the algorithm is weird, especially on TikTok, because if you like something or you watch for like even a little bit longer than something else, you get like 100 more videos like that. So for my patients, it's often like they come in and they say, I have this diagnosis because I watched 100 videos on TikTok that told me I have that diagnosis. And it makes sense because they did tell you had it because you watched one video and then another one and another one. And it's very validating if you're at all concerned about like something going on with you. Like,
and they say the same examples like, oh, yes, this is it. I know I have it.
Yep. And then you're like, I have it because TikTok said so. And then they also, for something like ADHD, they'll say, oh, it's underdiagnosed in women and people of color. And then they're like, well, I'm a woman and a person of color. Yes. So this is right? Like I only didn't know because of this. And so it's so validating. And I think like from my perspective, I always try to hope that people see that and then bring it to someone like me and we can have a good conversation about it. It doesn't always happen. And I think that people sometimes in my position can be more dismissive about like what people read and see. And I try really hard not to do that because I don't think it's helpful to go like, well, social media is like stupid and it's all wrong. It's more like, well, what did you see on that you resonated with and why was that exciting? And like, what made you feel good about that? And let's talk about that and like dive deeper into it.
And also like, who's the source? Because sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I'm this person. They have no history or experience or education in it, but they say that they do.
Yeah. And, speaking of kind of that conversation earlier, like what a therapist is, like on TikTok especially, it's often people who are coaches use that, and that's a totally different kind of certificate. Sometimes people put they're a therapist, but they just took like a class. Yeah. And so I think like being aware of that when you're seeing stuff is also helpful.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I'm glad you said that, because you said more people these days are talking about mental health. More people are becoming coaches and saying that they have this and I can help you. And here's the thing. I do believe that if you have experience in some things and you want to share that, it will help somebody. But I don't think that we should say that, now everything I say is the end all be all. You need the person that has been medically trained and, in this area. And a lot of people are steering away from that because they find the specialist.
Yeah. Or like, lived experiences are great. Like we need to learn from like our friends and our family members and the people who are talking about their experience with stuff. I have my own lived experience, but if I saw patients like I was the test case, I would give them the same medicine all the time. Right. I would tell them, well, all your symptoms will look like this. And that's hard, right? Because everybody looks different, and mental health's a little weird like that, where people present differently. Medication doesn't work perfectly in everyone, if at all. And I think, being aware of that and like hearing people's stories and taking them with a grain of salt, like, well, that's their experience. I'll just remember that's possible and take that to someone like me, I think is helpful.
That's real good. Let me tell you. So when I was doing my clinicals for pharmacy school, we were doing our rotations, I gave up my veterinary pharmacy rotation to get a second mental health rotation. I had never, because I was so intrigued and I was learning so much, even though my friend was like, don't go back to don't go there. They're going to get, different things. Because I had people that would get, when I go to the room and sit and do the games with them or go check, they would get close and try to tell me things. And, I want to know. So I'm getting close. They told me not to, but I'm like, okay, I want to. But one person, I did not believe that she belonged there based on the way she presented herself. I wasn't educated in mental health, but I was like, oh, she reminds me of me when I was growing up. And I did not know her history until the 30th day. Like I got close to her. We talked about future. We talked about life, what she wanted to do when she got out and released into the world. She never talked about which I found out that she had murdered her kids. I never knew that. That broke my heart because I was there. I spent a lot of time with her, and it broke I was like, okay, I need to self-evaluate and reevaluate myself, because I would have bet that she was that. I'm not saying I'm judged, but I never would have picked that up. I did not at all.
Maybe it gave you more empathy for it. Because if you would have read her chart immediately and you went in with, this is a whatever woman who did this, you would have a preconceived notion about her and her future and what, it's interesting like that. I think there's some power to that too. Yeah. I mean, mental illness and I was grateful. I said, I'm glad that I didn't know, because I would have been distant, but her plus like 4 more other people I really looked forward to seeing every day. And, even after I found that out, I was like, okay, I want to do another rotation with it. And I did some psychobiology. They let me look up that stuff, and it's so interesting to me. I wanted to change my whole career, but I was like, I'm at the end. I'm at the end of this now, and let me just go on and finish. But one of the things that was so fascinating to me is that I could see somebody's chart, and how they would say they can put on for you. They can put on a whole act. And a couple of those did. Like a man, he told me that he had made himself go crazy. He used those words because he had too much education. That's what he told me. But it was a whole other story from that. But I believed it because I heard people say that. Like, you're going to go to school too long, you're going to, your brain can't handle that. So I believed him. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I went, because I was in California for residency, a lot of people who we use the word delusions of grandeur, meaning like you think you did something great and like you really didn't. But because people in Silicon Valley are not people you would recognize, like it's not like Julia Roberts walked into your ER and then they said like, I'm Julia Roberts. And you're like, of course you're Julia Roberts. It's like, you're like, they say I invented like the microchip, and you're like, okay. And so then you Google them and they're totally not lying. But it's like this interesting thing, like where, sometimes they could be delusions, but sometimes it can be true. And so we often I hate using Google, but like would do that because we had gotten into situations where the person was saying something and they were actually right, because they're just, people in Silicon Valley like wear sneakers and like sweatpants to work, and they don't look like Mark Zuckerberg Zuckerberg. So you're like, I don't really understand, and it's super weird, but it's kind of fun.
I get it.
Yeah.
So with all the things, so when I was talking about how you fascinated me, I know one of the things that stuck out to me while you were talking about how creating boundaries for yourself and others is so hard, because I think I liked it because it's so hard for me. I didn't learn how to create boundaries for myself until after pharmacy school, and I'm still not great at it. So that was one of the things I know I wanted you to try to talk about, because I know us as women, just period, I don't know if the statistics show it, but are worse at doing it than men are.
Yeah. I think it's because there's an expectation that we can like do a lot and caregive and work and all this stuff. And sometimes that stuff falls more to women. And I think the balancing becomes more complicated. Mm-hmm. I think we brought it up in the context of burnout, which like is this word that people throw around a lot. Like now I'm kind of implying they do this for all mental health words, but it kind of is true. I think a lot of people think it means you're just like tired from work, but really it's like you're emotionally exhausted, which is like you're just done. Yeah. You either have depersonalization, which is a fancy word for feeling like disconnected from what you're doing, or cynical, which is in this circumstance a fancy word for being angry at everything. Okay. And then like a reduced sense of personal accomplishment, which basically means like you're doing less than you want to be doing and you feel like you are. Yes. And that's like sort of constellation of three things caused by work, which is important, is what burnout is. And I think it comes a lot from that, like saying yes all the time and having too many balls in the air. Mm-hmm. I think it's really hard for people who aren't used to saying no, or who feel like someone's going to judge them for saying no, to get used to doing that. I know for me, also in the context of like school and power differentials and stuff like that, you kind of are like, well, I have to say yes, that person's my supervisor, or they're fancy or whatever. And you're like, oh, I got to do that because if I do, it'll help my resume. And so there are definitely things like that are true. But I think I've learned over time to weigh in the emotional part of it too. So I think we often go, oh, well, here's this thing I was offered. Like, do I have the space to do it? Is it worth it? Like, am I going to get something from it? Whatever. But we don't at all go like, but can I mentally do it? Right. And I think that's the part that we forget. And I
forget that all the time.
And then we don't like consider it at all. Like you might also say, I can't really mentally do it, but I need to do it. And that happens sometimes for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think we just have to be better about that. I mean, I talked about how I would make a no list because a friend taught me that, which is like valuing saying no just as much as you value saying yes. So we have these like documents of everything we said yes to, right? Like those papers, the talks, like the whatever. And we're like, look, I'm awesome. This is all I said yes to. But you never have like that same feeling about what you say no to.
But and why? Why don't we?
Because it doesn't get us anything.
Okay.
I think because we have like a work culture that's based on overwork and productivity. Yeah. And so saying no is like the opposite, right? But, in our minds, like it's not getting further. But really, if you say no and you say no in an appropriate way, in the right ways, or you could say yes later, first of all, and second of all, it makes you better at the things you did say yes to. So if you said yes to 10 things, you're not going to be like at 100% for 10 things. Right. If you said yes to 8 or 7, you might. So I think it gives you the ability to be better at those things.
So, okay. So you talked about the burnout thing. So us seeing this, you talked about with work, but if in family, in the household, and, outside of work, because we have to add that all in. Yep. I'm just trying to see, how can we navigate that where we say, okay, you said 7 things I guess we just need to make the no list, and we need to start standing on that and making sure that we incorporate that in our decisions. Yeah. Because I don't know, because it's dangerous once you get to burnout or beyond. Yep,
it is. I think so. Some people, like I have a friend who calls the part after work your second shift. Like you come home and you have more people and more things and more responsibilities, and you have to factor that into what we're doing. I think for some reason when we think about work, it's like, I work at work, and those things don't bleed into life, as if that's possible at all, because that makes absolutely no sense, or that like life doesn't bleed into work. It all does. So you have to be mindful that they like very much overlap. But I think transition is really important. So like even if you need 15 minutes to like sit in your car and listen to a song and sing it really, really loud, like just do that. Talk to whoever's at home about how you do need that little bit of time to transition. Something like that can make a big difference. I think don't overcommit in the social department on top of coming home to stuff. I'm trying to learn to do that a little bit better because like I just moved and blah, like there's all this, like I'm so guilty when I don't do that stuff.
Are you a social person? See, me too. And so then I feel like what's the fear of missing out? I'm like, oh, if I don't go, I'm missing, like my friends will have something. And I'm like, okay, I went to 3 things with them already, but now they're going to something even better, but I can't go. You know, I really cannot go, but I don't want to miss them because I enjoy them, or I don't want to miss the event because they don't do it more. They only do it once a year. So sometimes I do because I'm a social person, but I have to, but then again, like I'll get sick. I'll get sick and it will be not a good thing. So I need to learn how to listen to my gut, listen to my body and say, okay, slow your roll, slow it down.
And I think when you say listen to your body, like a lot of the signs of this stuff, it's real subtle for a really long time until it's not subtle. Yeah. Right. So like for me, an early sign of like burnout or something is like about emails. I get very, very mad. Like if someone sends me another email, I'm going to take my laptop and throw it. Right. Like that's my gut is like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But really it's because like, if people email you, it's not because they're saying hi, it's because they want something for the most part. And so it's just when you don't have like the capacity to do more, you're like, well, look at all these other things I'm being asked to do. But that's so good
because you have an assistant though.
Yep, I do now.
So look, we need assistants, but we really do need to delegate some of that. Those little things that you would think you said they were so big and they really are little. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's like, that really will make me, I'm like, okay, I'm about to bust this window out with this computer because that you just, another one. I know, I get it.
And there's like for sure privilege in that, like to be at a place where you can have support at work and stuff like that. It's the first time I've ever had that. But, things also that I've noticed, like, I don't like doing laundry. I don't like having to deal with house stuff. Like if there's other stuff you can ever outsource and you can afford it, like it makes a big difference in your life. Like I get that it feels like you're being bougie and stuff, but it saves you so much emotional energy, like not having to call 75 painters and find the one that wants to fix your ceiling that's like leaked all over, right? But it's hard. I get it. Like most people can't do that, and I'm well aware of that. But I've tried to find the balance for me with some of that stuff because it does make a big difference. And I think, paying attention to like how tired you are, how much you're eating, what your stomach's telling you, what your body's telling you, like we're not good at that.
No, we're not. Do you think that, okay, let me ask you this, because we could talk on and on, because I one of the things my therapist told me after divorce was because I hate laundry and I hate washing dishes. My dishwasher went out when I moved into my new place.
Of course
and
it
I
did.
started washing dishes.
The universe is the worst.
It is. And then my daughter can't stand folding clothes, or I can wash them, but don't let me fold. I can't fold them. So it's going to be 7 hampers at the end of the week or the next week that I haven't hung up. So one of the things my therapist asked me, a little bit after divorce, she said, what's one thing that you liked having when you had 2 house income that you want to have now? I said, I liked having the person come clean my house every, couple of weeks, but I can't afford her now. And she said, well, you can make a way, give up some of the stuff that you can do without, if it's some subscriptions or whatever, so you can have that. Yeah. And I did that for a little while, but then I took a pay cut when I went to my new job. So, but it makes a difference.
Life is real complicated.
It makes a difference.
And all that stuff has to be factored into, right? Like not everyone can do all of this stuff, and there are ways to kind of balance despite that. Like I think self-care or finding ways for yourself is really much framed like being selfish.
Yes.
And so, if you're a person who like can't get out of work and can't switch anything, but also comes home and is also in charge and can't get out of any of that, like you're allowed to take 15 minutes.
You are.
Like,
okay, I love that.
Like I think if you take 15 minutes, you're going to be better at home with your kids. You're going to be better at home with your partner. You're going to, and I think we think, oh my gosh, I don't even have that. But I'm not saying you have to like whip out a yoga mat and spend an hour. I'd love, like, wish we all had the ability to do that every day. Yeah. But we don't, most of us don't. And so being able to say like, this thing really helps me like transition. This thing really helps me decompress.
Find what our transition can be for 15 minutes.
Like, where can you check in on yourself that feels good and that you're remembering you're like a human too? Because I think when you're like really responsible for lots of things at work and you can't get out of it, or you can't even call in sick, and then you get home and you can't call in sick there either, like it feels like such a burden. And so it's really important that you realize that like you're, no matter what, you're allowed to take like a little bit of time for you.
Yeah, we are. We have to remind ourselves that, though. But so my question was coming from what we just talked about. Do you think, or have you seen or noticed that when people are pushing themselves to the limit, and they not self-aware of that they're burnout or just overwhelmed, that their relationships that matter to them starts unraveling? So now they'll start blaming, or as I say, I can start blaming somebody else for something when it really wasn't anything, and now that's blown out of proportion. So now my whole world is blowing up.
I think it's a bit of that like cynicism aspect, right? Like you're really you start to be really negative about everything, and that is how you're seeing the world, and it makes it hard. And for me, when I'm super burnt out, like I'm so tired that I physically can't do anything. And so when people ask for things, when people like ask for my time, I'm like a little mean. Yeah. And I can catch it a bit more now, but I can like feel myself wanting to be like, why are you asking? And I'm like, oh gosh, like that's not me. Like at base, like this is me at baseline. I'm not a very cranky person. But when I start to get like that, I'm like, oh gosh, you got to take that away from all of the people. But no, it's not about them. It's about you in a lot of ways. But you're self-aware, so that's good. Lots of therapy. Okay. I go to weekly therapy. I've been going to therapy since college. Good. It's, I think, in my field, it's encouraged because like, let's say you have a patient and they're like pushing your buttons for some reason, like understanding why they're pushing your buttons helps me be better for them. I see. And it's like really important in psych. So that's always been something I do. But for me, my therapist is the one who told me I was burnt out in the first place, which is slightly embarrassing. Because this is great that this is a great thing to show that everybody is not aware. Yep. Even if you are professional and medically trained. Literally the day before I would lectured people on burnout, and I was like going to the primary care doctor, and I was like, this is why am I so tired? Fix my fatigue. Yeah. Like, give me meds, like take my blood and prove it's something else. And it wasn't, and I think, I laughed when she told me that, and she was like, what's funny? And I was like, I just feel like a little embarrassed. I think it's an embarrassed laugh. And she said, well, that's why people have friends and go to therapy and have other eyes, because you can't diagnose yourself. And like the most that you try, you might notice, like I noticed I was really tired, but I didn't notice like I was angry. I didn't notice the rest of it. Yeah. I just noticed that I was sleeping. And so sleeping would be more quickly solved by a primary care doctor. Yeah. So I was like, fix me, right? Something, but you know what I think though? I think the people, we that know that there's a diagnosis for some of everything, we want a diagnosis. Yeah. When it's really sometimes just like you just said, it's us pushing ourselves too far, and we just not, and we want to keep going. So now I need a medicine so I can keep going. I don't want to go to sleep. People are super funny. Like, I see healthcare workers as patients, and they're like the only group that see psychiatrists and want the medicine. Like most people are like, there's stigma towards meds. Yeah. There's like, what is it doing to my brain? Is it going to change me as a person? All this stuff, which isn't, it's the same as taking meds for hypertension. But if you've not been exposed, or high blood pressure, if you haven't been exposed to it, it's going to feel scary. But doctor people, pharmacists, they're going to go, hey, can I go back to work tomorrow? And what can you give me to go back to work tomorrow? And you're kind of like, well, will you punch me in the face if I tell you have to go talk to someone instead, and it's going to take some time, and they're kind of like, yes, actually, like that's the worst thing you could have possibly ever told me, because this is totally opposite as a patient population, which is interesting. Okay. No, I love that, because now you've shared that. Now somebody else will know, like, okay, I don't think, some of us think we know everything. We don't. We need help. I wish I knew everything. We need help. Everybody needs help. And I love that you say you go every week, because sometimes we'll put it off. But I think therapy is a blessing. And if you're able to go, then go. Yeah. Mental health system, totally broken, totally not fair. Wish it was better. We have to fix it. But if, again, you have the ability to figure it out and it works for you, it's another thing that's worth the time. Yeah. And it helps you. So it's helping you, not just in profession, but in your relationships. In everything. Okay. Yeah. So, but let me ask you this. So you touched on it a little bit, because one of the things I ask all the time to every person that comes is, what do you do for your self-care? Yep. It's not defined by, what people think the definition is, but what if you want to share? Sure. I always share. Okay. This, like, I have no problem sharing. Okay. So therapy every week. I take medication. I've been on medicine since college for depression. I haven't been depressed since college, but it
sort
of keeps my brain in check, which I like. I'm big on socializing and friends and stuff. And so plans really help me. One of the reasons that COVID was really hard was you couldn't make plans. Mm-hmm. And so for me, if I have a real busy week, it's okay. Like my job's hard. I'm allowed to have a hard job, but like planning a trip, planning an evening with friends, planning a phone call, that really helps me. I journal when I can. I sometimes I write also. So I sometimes stumble in this in between journaling and writing. And so it can be hard for me to take out a pen and paper and write and not write with a purpose of eventually publishing it. But I'm working on it. I also am working on reading for fun. Yeah. And for me, that means nothing about mental health advocacy, feminism, racism, sexism, because that's what I want to read. I want to read that stuff, but it is actually just compound. If you are trying to learn and it's kind of like what you do at work and you're trying to understand it, it's really good to do, but there's a point where it sort of becomes added stuff. It is. So you need to come to have a book club. It's women, professional women, different professions. And we started with 3 people. It's called Chapter 8, ATE, because we eat and we go. Ooh, you don't have to tell me more than once. And it started with 3 and we're at almost 50 people. All 50 don't come at every time. So the most I've had at one has been probably 25, but it's a great network, great community. We do read for fun. We probably had one Surrounded by Idiots was the one that we read that it was a serious book. But I think you would probably love that. And no pressure. You can come one every month, which some of them do, or you can come twice a year, but we're still in the group and it's phenomenal. It's great. I like community around stuff like that because I don't have hobbies. Okay. And you're here and you're new. I'm here and new and trying to make friends. But also I think when you go to so much school, you lose hobbies. I must have had hobbies at some point in my life, but I don't know what they are anymore. And so I'm trying to find time to get back into that where I can. We'll help you. I help you. You help me, I help you. I'm glad that you didn't say no to coming today. Yes, of course. And I'm glad that it's fun and it's not something pressed. So I've learned a lot and I know because I had 17 other questions to talk about that hopefully you'll come back. Happy to come back. But before we go, I want you to talk, because we're talking about writing. Yes. And the other thing I love that you have a book called How Do I Feel? Yep. And I would like you to talk about it. You could talk about it to everyone. I'll show you my cover because I wasn't cool enough to actually bring it because it's very classic me to not plan ahead of time enough to do that. But so the book is, it's part memoir, part patient narrative. All the patients are based on real patients. So we call those composites, meaning I'm not violating someone's trust by writing about them exclusively, but they're a mix of patients and they're all healthcare workers in some capacity. So an ER doc, a resident, a pre-med, and a nurse. And in looking at all of the challenges that come with caring for yourself when you care for other people, I think if you're a healthcare person and you're listening, it'll feel very validating. I think if you wonder what your healthcare worker is thinking and doing, it'll feel very good there too, especially if you've ever had an experience where you cried in front of someone and they acted a little bristly and you didn't really understand why. Understanding our emotional experience, I think, can help with that. And then, the themes are pretty universal. Everybody's a caregiver. Yes. Everybody deals with perfectionism. Everyone deals with overachieving. There's a lot of these things that healthcare is just this weird sort of subculture, but if you magnify it, all of us experience a lot of that. And so hopefully it feels helpful for people. I call it secret self-help because it's not when you're burnt out, you do this, but you see me go to therapy, you see my patients talking to me and we talk about tips and tricks and stuff in that context. So more dialogue meant for anybody. I hear it's a quick, easy read despite the content. At least that's what people tell me. That's okay. Which is, it's really important to me to be like that, short chapters, you could read it and not go, oh, what is this? Yeah. Okay. Why are you trying to teach me research? Because it's just not me. Lots of pop culture references where it makes sense. Okay. Yeah. I love that. So we can how can they order? Yeah. So it's able to be pre-ordered now. That helps me a ton. It's my first book. And so if you pre-order, people go, oh, somebody actually cares about that person. Yeah. Then more people order books for bookstores and stuff. You just Google, how do you feel? You could get it off Amazon. You could get it off Barnes & Noble. You could get it off Bookshop or your local bookstores. I'm a big local bookstore fan here in Memphis. You can get it off Novel and I can sign copies there because you can order signed copies. I'll have an event there in October as well.
Come.
Yeah.
We will come.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll be great. My book club can come.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. So I'll say that. It was so good, so good. So I'm so glad that you were here. What's something that is a good tip for the rest of this year that you want to share to anybody that's listening?
Your feelings are valid and you're allowed to have them. I'm not good at big feelings. I think, you mentioned sort of women's judgment of ourselves, but I think everybody, no matter what, has a big judgment over big feelings.
Yep.
Like they're going to interrupt my day. Someone's going to judge me for them. I'm going to be seen as, you said, crazy.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that like you actually feel when you need to feel. And so I'm working on that myself, which might again seem totally bonkers because of my job, but working on trying to have feelings when I'm supposed to have feelings and not going like these get in the way. Like I'm going to do everything else to avoid them. So I think that's important for people to know, like just because you have a feeling doesn't mean you have depression.
That's right. I appreciate that. Yeah. I love that. I hope that you liked it. Thanks for listening and watching Trim the Fat podcast. Follow her. Her information is at the bottom. And then also pre-order the book. I think that we all will gain something from it. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.